The Social Network movie review. So this is part of my scripted movie review series in which I take a movie review I wrote 10 years ago on the weblog and try to make a YouTube video out of it for whatever that may or may not be worth. In this case, Social Network came out exactly 10 years ago. I don't know if you remember this, but initially when this was coming out, or right before this came out, people were quite skeptical, at least in my circle of friends. People were saying, oh, a movie about Facebook and so soon? And it just seemed a little bit surreal that this internet application that, teenagers were wasting their time on was going to be the subject of a Hollywood movie. But then, very quickly, it started getting rave reviews from all the critics, and people started changing their minds, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to see it. And I had in my group of friends several people who told me it was absolutely the best movie they had ever seen. This was before I got around to seeing it myself. So by the time I walked into the movie theater, I was very primed for this movie. Like, I knew it was going to be good. I was even kind of expecting that it would be the best movie I had ever seen because so many people had told me that. And it wasn't the best movie I'd ever seen. I mean, to be fair, that's kind of an unfair hype to put onto any movie. But it was very, very good. Now, this movie was written by Aaron Sorkin, who's an excellent screenwriter. Right about the time that this movie came out was just about the time I was discovering who he was. I had previously reviewed on this YouTube channel Charlie Wilson's War, which is also one of Aaron Sorkin's movies. And I had praised that movie a lot for the screenwriting, which I said was just brilliant economical screenwriting in terms of how information was conveyed in a very entertaining way. At that time, I didn't know who Aaron Sorkin was. Maybe I should have, because he was already quite famous at that time for some of his earlier movies, A Few Good Men, as well as his TV show, The West Wing, but I can be a little bit out of it sometimes. So I didn't know who he was. But this movie as well was the same brilliant screenwriting that I had praised so much in Charlie Wilson's War. It's entertaining, there's a lot of great dialogue, every scene is packed with a lot of punches. Now, the interesting thing about this movie, the thing that arguably makes it so great and maybe arguably makes it its greatest flaw, is there's not really much of a plot to it. It's essentially two minor lawsuits that Aaron Sorkin somehow managed to stretch out into a 2-hour movie. Now, the fact that Aaron Sorkin was able to do that and to make it so entertaining just shows the genius of the man. And yet, when all is said and done, you do leave the movie theater kind of thinking, well, okay, but that was just only two minor lawsuits. Like, it's very entertaining, but maybe the ending impression of the story, there's not much of an ending impression because when it comes right down to it, there wasn't much of a story. Now that's something inherent from the original source material. Well, I don't know. I mean, like I said, on one hand, it's the movie's greatest genius that Aaron Sorkin was able to work with that. But on the other hand, it is kind of the major flaw with it. Other than that, I'm not sure what else to say about this movie that hasn't been said a million other times by everyone else. But I'll go through the motions anyways. All the characters are fully developed. Sorry, almost all of the characters are fully developed. We'll come back to that caveat in a moment. Fully developed and interesting. Filmmakers do a really good job of not choosing sides in the story. So you see each character's points of view and see how they are viewing this conflict. And that makes the movie almost a series of various character studies. The acting is top-notch. The movie is perfectly paced so that nothing ever seems to drag. At this point, you've probably already seen the movie, but if you haven't, it's definitely worth your time. Okay, small addendum to this. At the time this movie came out in 2010, there was a minor internet controversy about it, which many people were linking to at the time, and I'll link to the article down below in the description and just read an excerpt from it here. It said, the thrust of the complaint was about the film's portrayal of Asians, and I'll just quote from the article. Quote, "The world's youngest billionaire is also one of the only young CEOs around to maintain a long-standing relationship with a smart girl he's known since college. Mark Zuckerberg has been dating Priscilla Chan ever since they met at Harvard. But you wouldn't know it from watching The Social Network. Priscilla doesn't even get a mention. It seems Aaron Sorkin was too busy sexting up the lives of Harvard programmers to fit her in. That's not to say there aren't plenty of hot young Asian chicks scattered throughout the new Facebook movie. But they're more the kind of girls who like hooking up with strangers in the bathroom, stalking Jewish undergrads, and drinking Appletini. The Social Network definitely has an Asian fetish." Okay, end quote. So that's from the magazine. Do they have a point or not? I'm somewhat undecided on the matter myself. In it and of itself, I'm not sure it's such a big deal. I mean, you could make the argument that the Asian girls, one of whom is essentially just a non-entity in this movie, and the other is portrayed as just mentally unstable. You could make the argument that they were just what the storyline required, and that they just happened to be Asian. But taken as part of a larger problem in Hollywood casting, in which Asians are usually cast in either negative or overly stereotypical roles, then it becomes somewhat more telling. And particularly telling in this case, when it turns out that in the real-life story, there was an Asian person in a significant role, and she got cut from the storyline completely.